Sega, we're looking today at the Comix Zone on the Retro Flashback. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to another episode of my god-awful Louis B. Armstrong impersonations. Welcome to another episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. I just love that intro. It's just so weird, and I've been told I do a pretty decent Louis Armstrong, so I just wanted an opportunity to bust that out there. So, yeah. So, what are we taking a look at today? Well, we are taking a look, as you saw there, at Comix Zone for the Sega Genesis. This is a really interesting sort of one-off title that was developed reasonably late in the Genesis life cycle by the rather elite-sounding Sega Technical Institute, which was a specialized team that Sega had that got to work on some rather unique and interesting projects, and this one among them. This is a Brawler beat-em-up title that takes place, as you're seeing right now, entirely inside a comic book. Basically, this guy who's a comic book artist, had this crazy lightning storm happen that brought one of his big villains to life and sucked him into the comic book, and now he's got to fight his way through it to try to restore the natural order, I guess, if you want to call it that. And this is a really neat game. It plays fairly traditionally like a brawler, I guess, but it has some very, very unique mechanics, and especially just this game is just dripping in style, and it's sort of its best trait. It plays well. It is very, very difficult, even as brawlers go, but it is a lot of fun, and it just looks so amazing. But you're going to see that here. So we already saw this intro here while I was talking about it, so we'll skip this. He has a pet rat as well, by the way, this comic book artist. That does play into things later. So as you can see, we got sucked in. So the mechanics, the combat system mechanics in this game are pretty basic. You have pretty much an attack button, which you can modify your attacks depending on how you are pressing the directional pad, as you're seeing here. And you do have multiple items, which you can pick up throughout the world and use to different effects. So take this guy out. So you can see here the combat in this game, there are not a lot of enemies that you're going to be fighting simultaneously, and while this game is quite difficult, it is largely pattern memorization. The enemies tend to work more or less the same way. Their attack and defense patterns are fairly predictable, and you just have to sort of get through them. But it takes a lot to learn the systems of each enemy, for sure, and things definitely do get tricky as you go on. So you see here also you get multiple directions you can go sometimes, and this is the really neat part of this. Check this out. That's what I just love about this game. So this thing completely owns its comic book motif and just sort of wears it right on its sleeve. It's like, yep, this isn't a free scrolling game. You are fighting in basically miniature arenas that are determined by the screen that you're on, but you are shifting in between the cells of the comic book, and you can always see on the periphery the cells that in some cases you've either been in or that you're going to. So you really get the feel that you're playing inside a comic book, which I think is just so cool. And as you can see there, I picked up this rat from a cage, which is this guy's pet rat, which you can actually use as sort of a secondary attack thing. You can send him out and he will sort of nibble on enemies and I guess distract them. He does do a little bit of damage, but his main thing is keeping them off of you so that you can finish them off. I also have, which I probably should use here, I have that pill bottle, and of course we know in video games the pills are made of amazing nanotechnology that suddenly heals all wounds, so there you go. And you can see right under the item bank up there is my energy bar, and that depletes all the way, and well, you're screwed. That's basically it. There's only one life, so you lose that and it's game over. But you can see here, this screen is a really good example of just how amazing the production values in this game are, and just how far Sega Technical Institute was able to push the Genesis. Like, check that water effect out. In the 16-bit era, that was insane. And it is really, the production values in this game are really amazing. It's actually a reasonably competent brawler. Ah, screwed that up. It is a reasonably competent brawler, though, as I said, it is fairly challenging and does get unforgiving at times. It's definitely not the best brawler, and given that this came out post Final Fight, Streets of Rage, etc., you know, you could be forgiven, especially at the time, for saying, well, you have better choices if you want to play brawlers, and you might, for sure. But the competent brawler gameplay, so you can see I beat that section of the game there. So we're gonna get a little bit of bonus here. So I got my superhero meter up a decent amount there. This game does keep score in some rudimentary fashion, but it basically doesn't matter. Score is pretty much meaningless in this game. There's really no benefit to it. There we go. But yeah, the competent gameplay plus just the incredible motif and gorgeous production values of this game are really what sell it. It's just... Yeah, you see I hurt myself there by hitting those fans. There is supposedly a way to open those without harming yourselves with them. I just never seem to get it right. I'm actually doing fairly well. I'm actually really bad at this game. I've never gotten even remotely close to the end of it, actually. But I seem to be holding my own okay here, which is nice, especially considering I'm commentating over it. But this, yeah, just the style of this game is really what sells it, and the gameplay is fine as well. But it looks good. It has a sense of style that's very much all its own and very unique and different. It sounds really good. The soundtrack is really good. Actually, this game actually came with a soundtrack CD if you bought the special retail edition of it when it came out. That had it wasn't the original score, but it had a bunch of music that I don't know if it was music that either the tunes in this game were based off of, or if it was just sort of an inspired by kind of thing. I'm gonna guess the latter. But it just, the sense of style in this is really great, and it's a really unique title. And I don't actually know how well it's sold. I'm gonna guess not very well, because this is the only Comix Zone. This game has come out in a few different places. It came out on some other platforms back in the day, and it has had a lot of re-releases, and it is very fondly regarded, especially by Genesis fans. But it never got a sequel, it never became a franchise, and in fact, not too many years after this came out, I believe Sega Technical Institute was disbanded. The team actually does no longer exist. They went on to a number of different teams. But this was an example of some of the quirkier stuff that Sega did, especially in the Genesis era, though certainly they did plenty of it in the Saturn and Dreamcast eras as well. One of the things that was really cool about Sega, even for all the massive missteps they made as a company, especially when it came to how they promoted and supported their hardware in later years, Sega was a company back then that really took chances. They often greenlit some really weird projects, and yeah, it was easier to do that kind of thing back then when game budgets were a lot less. And so we got this little miniature puzzle here that you'll see. Oh, I screwed it up too. There we go. It was a lot easier to greenlight and do oddball projects back in this day when budgets were a lot lower and the financial risk that companies had to undertake was much lower. I mean, in this day and age, you know, one of the main things that people, myself included, have problems with when it comes to AAA game development in this day and age is that it has become so expensive and so risky that it's very rare to see anything but the safest bets getting made, which really stifles innovation and creativity. But Sega, when they were riding high in particular, they just ran with everything. They did some really crazy, unique games, and they just a lot of them, frankly, I think most of them didn't sell. Actually, most of them were money losing, or at the very least, certainly not profitable. But they kept doing it, and they had some amazing creators, and they let them create. They just went, you know what, here's some money, go do something cool, and let's see what happens. And I'm gonna try to let my rat buddy out here so I can get through this without getting killed. Oh, well, I would have done really well there if I hadn't stood on top of that bomb. Herp. And I get X'd out. Unfortunate. And he got away, and now he's going to destroy the whole world. Basically, that's the key narrative piece with this, is that if you die, your guy becomes fully flesh and bone and can take over the entire world. Oh, well. But yeah, Sega really fostered a lot of creative, weird, special stuff. And this was very much among them. It didn't sell at the time, but it developed a following, and it is one of the things that Sega is very well known for. So you can see where the challenge comes in here, because I got to that second episode, but there's no continues. I bombed out of that, and now I got to do the whole thing again. So getting to the end of this game would be quite a challenge. I don't know. This is one of those games I don't know if I'd ever finish just for lack of time, but I would certainly like to. It could be it definitely could be a lot of fun. And this is a prime example of Sega's more unique years, where they really this was sort of a key part of their identity as a company, was doing weird and wonderful things that you did see from a lot of other companies at the time as well, but more so. Like, these guys were considered the kooky risk takers compared to Nintendo, which did do a lot of really cool creative stuff, but were generally regarded as the company that played it a little more safe than certain others did. And it's a shame that this kind of thing doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, we do have indie games these days, and indie games definitely do a lot of unique creative things, but I've never quite seen anything like this come out of that scene, and I really don't know if we ever will. This had a very unique vibe to it, even though it was done by Sega. It was actually not done in Japan, because Sega Technical Institute was actually a US-centric team, which was the really interesting thing as well, because a lot of Sega's titles and a lot of their most fondly regarded properties were actually developed in Japan. They did have American teams, but they didn't tend to get a lot of recognition compared to a lot of their Japanese counterparts. Ooh, got that 16-bit slowdown going on here. But this game actually came out of the States and had some of the unique charm and quirk that, one could be forgiven for thinking that this was something that came from Japan, but it actually didn't. And that's yet another thing that makes it really unique and different. The good news is that if you do want to play Comix Zone, you have a number of different ways to get it. I am playing this through the Wii Virtual Console right now, but this game has actually come out in a number of different places. There are versions of it on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network. It's been in a ton of different retail Sega compilation packages for a number of different platforms. And that's kind of the interesting thing, because this game kind of has a cult following. Though it was not at all popular and actually became fairly hard to get back in its sort of original form, it is very, very easy to acquire now. So if you want to try this out, you definitely have a lot of different ways to do so, which is great, because this is a very unique and different title that has familiar gameplay and a familiar methodology to it, I guess, but in terms of its appearance and its narrative and just its sense of style, it is really unique compared to a lot of what's out there. And I mean, brawlers are hard enough to find in this day and age, and brawlers that break the mold are even harder. But now you have a really easy way to get your hands on this unique title. It is only one player. Most brawlers are at least two player. This is not, because this is very story driven, so it is exclusively a single-player game. But it does that very well. It being designed around that concept makes it actually really flow very well. And it allows these art assets to shine a little bit more because, you know, the sprites are a little larger, the animation quality is a little higher, and because it doesn't have to accommodate multiple characters on the screen at once, which just adds to its appeal, in my opinion. It's wholly unique, and I think definitely a title for anyone who wants to immerse themselves in Genesis literacy. But if you are into brawlers and just want to play something that broke the norm in a lot of different ways for its time, you can definitely do a lot worse than this one, and it's easy to get. So there you have it. Yeah, that is Comix Zone, published by Sega and developed by Sega Technical Institute in 1995 for the Sega Genesis. I really, really enjoy this game, and I highly recommend it. It is one of the more memorable titles for the Sega Genesis. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.